Let's be honest with ourselves. The last couple of weeks have definitely not been what you would call great weeks, for some of the biggest stars, in the sport of MMA. Hasn't even been a great couple of weeks for some of the retired legends of MMA. I don't think that I need to go terribly into detail about the things that I'm talking about here. You know, Everybody knows what I'm talking about. This past week, Conor McGregor was accused of assaulting and breaking the nose of an Italian DJ. That's a pretty lousy story. And before that, Chuck Liddell was accused of domestic assault, accused of hitting his wife. That's obviously not a good look for the sport. And maybe the biggest one of all, because it looms just so heavily, because it's one of these things where this guy is a repeat offender in this sort of activity in the sport, but Jon Jones was also accused and arrested for domestic assault in Las Vegas. That story in particular is absolutely horrific because it involves his children. Jon Jones's daughter actually had to go to security at this hotel in Las Vegas where Jon Jones was staying while he was waiting to be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. Actually had to go to security and say, "Please call the police, my mommy needs help." And of course the reason why she needed help was because she was being abused by her fiance, Jon Jones, who happens to be, potentially, arguably, the biggest star in the sport. And that confronts us with some very serious questions about how it is that the sport is actually dealing with these kinds of issues. And I think that what we can tell is honestly not that well. The sport does not seem to really be terribly interested in doing anything to regulate the behavior, of these particular individuals that are doing this sort of stuff. I mean, Jon Jones and Chuck Liddell are only the latest two names that have been implicated in it. The fact that the UFC would actually sign Greg Hardy, knowing full well about his long history of not only having been involved in domestic abuse and domestic violence, but unapologetically so, like unabashedly unapologetically so. And so I think fans, who approach this sport from maybe a little bit more of a conscientious point of view, which I understand, that is a very strange thing to say about a sport where basically two guys go into a cage to beat the shit out of each other. That is a little bit of a strange thing to say. But I think that a lot of people are actually now looking at this sport and they are asking themselves this question. Who's going to be the grown-up in the room here? Who's going to be daddy? Who's going to do something about these situations? As it turns out, somebody did come forward this past week to actually be that person, to be the grown-up in the room, to be daddy. And that was Mike Winklejohn of Jackson Wink MMA. And he came out and he contacted Jon Jones and he told him, as long as this kind of stuff is going on, you can't come to the gym anymore. You can't come to the gym anymore. You can't train here. Go get your alcoholism under control. Get your anger issues under control. We don't want to see any more of this. We don't want to see any more gun incidents. We don't want to see any more vehicular incidents. We don't want to see any more domestic assault incidents. And until we stop seeing these things, you cannot come in and train at the Jackson Wing MMA gym in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where Jon Jones has trained for his entire career. Now, there is something that needs to be said about that. We do need to understand exactly what it is that Mike Winklejohn has the power and the authority to do and what he doesn't. Is that Mike Winklejohn has the ability to stop Jon Jones from coming into the actual facility, the actual gym, the actual place where kids come to train, the actual place where women come to receive training in self-defense. He has the power to do that. But he doesn't have the power to stop any of the other coaches from going off to another facility or just going off to, say, like a little gym in their garage or something like that and continuing to work with Jon. And a statement from Jon Jones has pretty much indicated that his expectation, at the very least his expectation, is that the rest of his coaching, quote-unquote, team are going to continue to work with him despite all of this stuff that's been going on, despite the challenges that confronts them with, and despite the massive black eye that he has dealt the sport when he did this. And frustratingly, it is not even the first one that he has ever inflicted upon this sport. Now, as of the recording of this video, I haven't seen anything that indicates that any of Jon Jones's other coaches have also gone hands-off with him. And because Jon Jones is such a big star, he is such a big draw, and there is so much money involved in every Jon Jones fight, I think it's pretty safe to say that there is probably a coach or a team of coaches or even an entire team out there that would happily take him on and work with him despite what is, for lack of any better way to describe it, complete scumbag behavior. And so that's what we need to understand about this situation, is that Mike Winklejohn can prevent Jon Jones from coming into the Jackson Wink MMA gym and working out there and training there. But he doesn't have the power or the authority to make any of these other coaches, any of these other gyms, any of these other trainers, any of these other MMA teams. He doesn't have the power to make them take seriously, what Jon Jones has done to his fiancée. I mean, let's be real with ourselves for a minute here, and let's kind of admit to ourselves that as much as some people might wish that the mixed martial arts sport, was about, high-minded principles and things like that, obviously what it's really about at the end of the day, and everybody seems to understand this, is that it really is just about money. And money will make a lot of people overlook a lot of things. And it seems to me that the more money is involved, the less likely somebody's willing to come forward and be the grown-up. Somebody's less likely to come forward and be daddy. And so let's look at another one of these big stars that's been having these problems lately. Let's go back, of course, to Conor McGregor. And so Conor McGregor, he was involved in this incident with this Italian DJ, but not only isn't that not only his only recent incident, it's not even his only recent incident involving a musician. Famously, there was his altercation with Machine Gun Kelly at the MTV Video Awards. And so, basically, right now, Conor McGregor is a ticking time bomb. So what's Ken Kavanagh doing? Coach Ken Kavanagh. The guy who is probably most responsible for molding Conor McGregor into the fighter that he is today. What's Ken Kavanagh doing to control this behavior? Is he calling up Conor and telling him, hey, listen, Conor, as long as you're doing this kind of stuff, you can't come down to the gym. You can't come train here. We can't have this kind of thing going on. No, it really doesn't look like Ken Kavanagh is doing that sort of thing. And that's really frustrating, because for the number of people who would, who have been Conor McGregor fans and who would honestly like to continue being Conor McGregor fans, it's really difficult when he's out walking around in the street just bullying non-fighters. I mean, yeah, everybody gets that he's mad that he lost to Dustin Poirier twice. Everybody gets that he's mad that he lost to Khabib Nurmagomedov. Oof, I just butchered that really bad. Nurmagomedov. Khabib Nurmagomedov. Everybody knows that he's mad that he lost to Khabib Nurmagomedov. But the place to settle these things is supposed to be in an MMA cage, not out in the street just assaulting, random people who aren't trained fighters. It's a black eye to this sport. It's a black eye to Kavanagh's gym, and it's actually a black eye to Kavanagh himself. So why is it that nobody is willing to step up and do this? Especially when you consider the fact that that black eye is deeper and darker and hurts a whole lot more because it's being inflicted by one of the biggest stars to ever be associated with this sport, or with Ken Kavanagh's gym. So why is it that the only person in this entire sport that's willing to step up and be a grown-up, the only person who's willing to step up and be daddy, it's not even Dana White, although to his credit he did cut a fighter this week for a domestic violence charge. No idea why that hasn't been done with Jon Jones. But the only person who really seems to be willing to do to it, commit to it, despite the amount of money that they're walking away from, is Mike Winklejohn. And when you consider that, it just tells you so much about Mike Winklejohn's scale of values compared to so many other people in this sport. Even people that we would like to like. I'd like to like Jon Jones. I'd like to continue liking Conor McGregor, but I can't if this kind of stuff is going on. Because the scale of values is absolutely abysmal. If you're a trained fighter beating up non-trained fighters, that's pretty disturbing. If you're a grown man, let alone a grown man who's a trained fighter, and you're beating up on your family, on female members of your family, that's disgusting. We need a lot more people with the strong values that Mike Winklejohn has, and way fewer people that are just willing to be plied by money.